I could never understand why I got into trouble when I was younger. And I remember getting punished. I remember just being a hellion. And I remember when I was a young teenager, I came across a letter that was written by my headmaster in Victoria School in Hong Kong, February 1977. And I kind of laughed at it at the time, but it was this catalog of crap I was doing. I remember being arrested by Hong Kong police when I was about 7. We were British and military, and my behavior got so bad that my parents, they were concerned about my education because I was going to army schools, and we moved every 2-3 years. Not a very good way to get your education. So there was a bursary program for military families to send their kids to public school. Well, in England, public school is private school, and it's like Harry Potter but without the magic. So you have houses and uniforms and headmasters and house parents and structure. So there I am, September 1977, standing on the driveway of this old mansion that was now a school, and my dad's heading off back to the airport to go back to Germany where we were posted after Hong Kong. And I'm there, see you in a couple of months. And that was my schooling for until I was 17. So in England, you do exams by subject. So I got okay marks, and I transitioned to a different one, St. George's in a different part of the country. But in between that transition, when I was 13, that would have been 1982, we moved to Cyprus. And, having had a girlfriend there, I started to have more of an interest in that. I was masturbating at 12, and I end up in Cyprus, and I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like, there's very few boys. I'm deemed to be exotic because I go to private school, and I lost my virginity when I was 13. Did other sex with her, like oral sex. Like, I was very, very sexualized. And, my parents would often joke with me that when I went back to school, there'd be this long line of girls waiting at the door. Where's Lee? Where's Lee? Well, he's gone back to school. My relationship with my parents isn't very, very good because I don't really know them. And in their defense, they don't really know me. And I had relationships with girls that I wanted to go somewhere, but I was just too focused on having sex. And I never really understood where it came from, because my peers weren't in the same boat. They didn't talk about that. They didn't act that way. So 17, I finished school. Now we're living in England. We settled in New York. I do the normal thing. I go get a job. And I had to do some photocopying. And when I was photocopying, somebody spilt some ink or something, and a woman went past with perfume, and it was just this perfect chemical concoction. And all these memories come back. And I'm just, what the fuck? I'm starting to remember everything that happened to me when I was 6 with my babysitter. And I don't know how I made it through the rest of the day, because emotionally I was all over the place. And I was trying to keep it in. And that's an English thing. You don't show emotion, you just take it on the chin. But what I remember is each apartment level basically was just 2 apartments. But the girl across, and I can only assume that she was at least 16 because she was physically developed. Blonde girl. She babysat me, and I only remember her babysitting me once. And my parents had gone out, and I was wearing cotton pajamas. We're in the tropics. It's, you know, you don't wear anything too warm. And she takes her clothes off. She's completely naked. And she starts chasing me around. And I think it's fun. It's a game. I don't seem to think anything of it. So she ends up catching me, and she leads me to the couch. And she lies down there naked, and she's asking me to tickle her. And I basically got my hand in her vagina. And she's enjoying it. And she's touching me. She undoes my pajama pants, and she's stroking my penis.
4 till 5.
And from that perspective, I'm enjoying it. And I just completely black it all out. But I couldn't hide how I felt about it. And then everything made sense. Why I was being just a little bastard at school and not listening and being defiant and being so sexualized. It all made sense. And it was a lot to deal with. And I couldn't tell anyone because you suck it up, take it on the chin. You don't tell anybody your problems. And I sure as hell didn't have the relationship with my parents so that I could talk to them about it. And I'm 46, and I can stand in a room and tell people about what happened to me, but I can't have that conversation with my parents. I can't do it. Within less than a year of those memories coming back, I leave home, I join the army, and I just try and just distance myself from it and try and just deal with what I went through. And I feel lucky because it was a girl that abused me. Because I've dealt with people that have been abused by men. And that can carry a different kind of effect. So how twisted is that? That I felt, it's okay, it was a girl, no big deal. You know, I wanted to get away. What's the best way to get away? Join up. What do we covet? We covet what we know. My dad was in the army. My mum had been a soldier. You know, a long history of military involvement in my families. So it seemed like the right choice. I met my wife, who was a Canadian working up there. So we just hit it off, and we were both in our mid-20s, and we were going to be around the block, and we realized what we really wanted out of life. She was my soulmate. We got married. I've told her, she knows. And I think it explained some things to her with how I acted. Because I'd talked to guys about it in the army, you know. And usually it was, oh, you're a lucky bastard. Oh, really? You had sex with a girl when you're 6? You're awesome, you know. Just that kind of banter, the barracks room banter, you know. But it was hard because it's pervasive in society now. I mean, you see an article where, you know, a teacher, male teacher, is convicted for having sex with a 15-year-old student, female student. And it's, you know, stick a spike up his ass, burn him at the stake, lock him away, cut his nuts off. Like, it's hate. You switch it, then there's another story. Adult female has sex with a 15-year-old boy. And you just have to look at the newspaper comments online. Oh, I wish she had been my teacher. Oh, lucky guy. It's a completely different mindset, which makes it even harder because then everyone looks at you like, what are you complaining about? Because it ain't fucking right. It wasn't that I trusted or didn't trust. There were times where I felt like I wanted to be in love with somebody, but I didn't have that feeling. I faked it. I'm not a sociopath, but like, I just didn't feel that way. And maybe it was because of how I'd been abused. Just, I didn't want to trust anyone. I just wanted to fuck and have sex with the next girl. You know, I try and laugh it off now, but I mean, I had a threesome when I was 14. Like, by the time I was 19, I'd probably had more sex than most guys have had in their fucking 40s. And I guess to me that's when I kind of started to slow down, because I had my memories back by then. I was in the army, I was in structure, and I didn't have that same drive that I had before. And, you know, the army was safe. I know it sounds weird, but you knew you could count on the guys you were sharing the trench with. You knew that they had your back and they wouldn't fuck you over. And they would risk their life for you. And you do the same to them. And I enjoyed that for 12 years. And I don't think it's a surprise that I ended up in law enforcement, which was paramilitary, because you live that every day. You'd rather take the bullet than your mate. So that trust is there. And over time, maybe through osmosis, I was just in the right place at the right time when I met my wife. And I could then. I didn't have to fake it, because I was ready. So as I got older, I wanted to shift from my military, and I became very passionate about policing. And I think that's always run through me about service to my country, service to my queen, service to my family, service to my community. So I became a police officer with Warwickshire Constabulary, and then before that I got married to my wife. And by that time, I was like 25, 26, I felt stable within myself. But I've always struggled with opening up and having that kind of relationship, because I don't have it with my folks. I see how Candace has her relationship with her folks, and it's how I wish I could have mine, but it doesn't happen. So when I start the immigration process to come over here, and I become a uniform officer, and most of our sexual assault victims after hours go to our Royal University Hospital, which was in my patch, my district. So I started to get those dispatch calls, and I realized that I could use my experience as a way to connect with victims, much the way that addicts that are going through therapy have a lot more of a buy-in with counselors that have been there. And I often got complimented by social services that we were working with on my level of empathy and how I dealt with the victim. And that really sparked my interest in becoming an investigator with our sex crimes and child abuse unit. So there were times where I felt I had the advantage to my peers because I could tell them, I get it. I get what you're going through because I went through it. But you don't have to let it ruin your life. You can have a good life. And I had a lot of success with bonding with the kids and keeping it so that there was no conflict of interest, that it was a fair disclosure that these children were given. And the problem was, over years, it gets harder to do. And the interviews become very, very draining and emotional. So after 3 years, I had to, I requested to leave. And I think it was the right decision. Because now it's been 3 weeks since I left the unit. I'm back in uniform. I'm a communications sergeant for one of the patrol shifts. And I'm feeling able to just decompress from that. And one of the things that I did in the 3 years that I was in the unit was use a counselor myself. I wanted to maintain a balance and not have the work grind me down, because I have kids and I have a wife and I have a family, and I don't want my work and my experiences to negatively affect them. And that's always been a driving force for me, is I didn't want my kids to have the relationship with me that I had with my parents. And I get why they made their decisions, but there's a cost to everything that we do. We have a really, really phenomenal training course for the child abuse investigation course on psychology and behavioral and interview and child development. Like, it's a phenomenal course. And they cover all these aspects. And it was kind of therapy for me. I remember we got to a segment where they were talking about false accusations, from hypnotists and those kind of therapies. And I don't remember the doctor's name, but she was talking about how real memories are almost always sensory driven. And she talked about smell. And I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to it. And I was like, holy fuck. Because it was just this weird combination of smells that just opened everything up. And it really was surreal. It was like a peep show, except it's your memories. And they instantly come flooding back. Instant recall. I still find it bizarre how my brain had just split it off. And I went to speak to her afterwards, because another thing that she talked about was the rarity of females abusing young children. Although I have come to find in my field that it's not really that rare. It's just rarely reported. So, it was 2 weeks of draining and times where I got emotional, and I did disclose publicly to my class members that I had been abused, because for the same reason that I disclosed in interviews, I want them to see, because one of the myths out there, which I find fucking annoying, is that an abused kid will be an abuser themselves. And I know that that's one of your big things of pushing is, statistically, that is bullshit. But yet it's still out there. People buy into that. And so you have those dilemmas and emotions running through you when you do make a disclosure. are the people in the crowd thinking, oh fuck, he abuses his own kids. And that, you know, I talk about how I feel that I'm adjusted, but with my own boys, I am so careful about how I'm physically in contact with them in the public, because that goes through my mind. If I hug my kid too long, is someone in the park going to think I'm a pervert? Like, this is the crap that goes in your head when you're a fucking survivor. It has an effect, but not that my kids notice. I try really hard to, you know, to give hugs, to give kisses, because that's what a parent should do. But it comes into your head, and that's kind of fucked up. And the challenge is not to be a helicopter parent, and not to project your fears and your overprotectiveness onto them, because that's not going to help them in life. You know, bad things happen to good people all the time. I'm a cop. I mean, I can write the book on that one. I don't know if it was because of the lack of control I had when I was a kid, when I was abused, but I don't like not being in control of myself. I don't want to be another victim. It gave me a purpose. And I found talking about it. I mean, I really went into the nuts and bolts of it that we have. You know, typically it would be, you know, when I was 6, I was sexually abused by my babysitter. And then people's typical response is, yeah, well, what the fuck do you say to that? Did you have tea and biscuits after? Like, they don't want to know. And I don't blame them for that. It's a pretty big thing to throw on somebody. And maybe I overshared too early. Once I had accepted that I had that happen, I found some solace in being able to go, shit happens to everybody all the time. Don't let that define you. Don't go out thinking, okay, well, I'm damaged goods, I'm broken, nobody's going to want me, nobody's going to want to do anything. Because that's a defeatist mentality. And then the person that's done that to you is won. Whether they've meant to do it through, or it was just the selfish sexual friggin' desires that led them to act the way they did. Yeah, genetics play. You know, for me, I guess later in life it transitioned to weight gain, and I still struggle with that. I'm probably a stress eater to some degree, you know, and I've gone heavy and then I've lost weight again. You know, in the army it was easy. You ran, you worked out, and if you didn't, you knew you were going to get your ass kicked from the sergeant and the sergeant major. When I came out into civvy life, you know, there wasn't that kind of control. So I'm still affected by it, but I don't let it define how I am as a person. But I can tell you right now, where I'm at right now is awesome. I couldn't ask for anything better, but I had to work for it. And if that means going and talking to a counselor, getting therapy, giving back, accepting what happened to you sucked and you had no control over it, but you want to take ownership of it now, then that's the way to go. But I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a work in progress. I mean, I'm 46. I will never have this conversation with my parents. I don't know if it's because they don't know, or I'm afraid that they know and didn't do anything. And if it was the latter, I don't know if I can handle that. For me, It's ongoing therapy. It's an opportunity to talk about it. But more importantly, and in the same way that I feel that you started down this road, it's telling people, number one, this happens a fucking lot. Number two, it happens to everybody from all walks of life. And because it's kind of this focus for us guys, it happens to a lot of guys. And they've stayed quiet. And the most important thing is I want people that have gone through this, whether it be boys or girls or men and women, that there are people that have gone through the same. You can have a great life. And there's support. There's people there who will help you. I want my legacy to be a great relationship with my kids and my wife and my family, and to have grandkids, and to be well remembered, to have served my community. Like, I'm not going to let it define my life in a negative way. I mean, it does. We can't sit back and say it doesn't define us. It does define us. But we choose to make it define us in a better way and not give in to that feeling of hopelessness that we once had. And I'm hoping that my story and all of the other stories will help somebody to make that step.